Thinking fast and talking smart sound like natural talents, something you either have or you don't. Some people seem to answer instantly. Their words land clean. Their ideas sound sharp. Others hesitate. They over-explain. They walk away from conversations thinking, I knew what I meant. I just didn't say it right. If that feels familiar, here is the truth most people never hear. The problem is not your intelligence. The problem is not your vocabulary, and it's not confidence either. The real problem is that no one ever taught you how to think while speaking. Most people grow up learning what to say. They study facts. They memorize information. They collect opinions. But when pressure shows up, during a meeting, a difficult question, an interview, a disagreement, their mind speeds up and their structure disappears. Thoughts collide. Words spill out. Clarity is lost. You don't sound slow because you think slowly. You sound unclear because your thinking has no system under pressure, and pressure is where communication actually matters. Think about the moments that shape how people see you. When someone asks a direct question and all eyes turn toward you. When you're challenged unexpectedly. When you need to explain something important in a few seconds. When silence feels uncomfortable and you rush to fill it. Those moments don't reward speed. They reward clarity. Here's the mistake most people make. They believe that thinking fast means responding immediately. They believe talking smart means using more words, more detail, more explanation. So they rush, they fill space, they talk at people instead of to them. But the most respected communicators do the opposite. They pause, they choose, they speak with intention. They understand something crucial. Your words follow your thinking, not the other way around. If your mind is cluttered, your speech will be cluttered. If your thinking is calm, your words will sound confident. If your thoughts are structured, people feel safe listening to you. This audiobook is not about becoming louder. It's not about dominating conversations. And it's definitely not about trying to sound impressive. It's about learning how to stay clear when the moment matters. Over the next chapters, you'll learn how to slow your internal chaos without slowing your response. You'll learn how to organize your thoughts in seconds, not minutes. You'll learn how to use silence as a tool instead of fearing it. And you'll learn how to speak in a way that makes people lean in, not tune out. This is communication built on control, not performance. Because smart communication doesn't come from speed alone. It comes from knowing what matters and being willing to say only that. Most people talk to relieve their own discomfort. Strong communicators speak to create clarity for others. There's a difference. When you learn to pause before reacting, you regain control. When you learn to structure your thoughts quickly, you sound intelligent without trying. When you stop over-explaining, people start trusting you more. And trust is the real currency of communication. You don't need to have the perfect answer. You need to deliver a clear one. Throughout this audiobook, each chapter will focus on one essential skill, one shift that changes how your words are received. These aren't abstract theories. They're practical techniques you can apply immediately, whether you're speaking in a meeting, responding under pressure, or navigating everyday conversations. You'll learn how to answer questions without rambling, how to stay calm when challenged, how to sound confident without raising your voice, how to make people understand you the first time. Most importantly, you'll learn how to train communication like a skill, not rely on talent or mood. Because clarity is trained, calm is practiced, and strong communication is built through repetition, not motivation. By the end of this audiobook, you won't just speak differently, you'll think differently while speaking. You'll feel less rushed, less reactive, more grounded, and people will notice. Not because you said more, but because what you said carried weight. Think clearly, speak deliberately. That's where smart communication begins. Chapter 1. Think before you speak. The power of the pause. Most people believe that good communicators are fast communicators. They imagine someone who always has an answer ready, someone who never hesitates, never pauses, never searches for words. So when silence appears, they panic, they rush to speak, they fill the space, and without realizing it, they weaken everything they're trying to say. This belief is one of the biggest misunderstandings about communication. Strong communication does not begin with speed. It begins with control. The pause is not a flaw. The pause is the moment where control is reclaimed. When someone asks you a question and you answer immediately, you are reacting. When you allow yourself even a brief pause, you are choosing, and that small difference changes how your words sound, how they feel, and how they are received. Most people are uncomfortable with silence because silence feels like exposure. It feels like being evaluated. It feels like you're losing momentum. So people speak quickly to escape that feeling. They assume that talking fast signals competence. But speed does not signal intelligence. It signals urgency. Clarity, on the other hand, signals confidence. When you pause before speaking, several important things happen at once. Your breathing slows. Your nervous system shifts out of fight or flight. Your thoughts stop colliding and begin lining up. And to the person listening, something subtle but powerful happens. They pay attention. Silence creates gravity. Think about the people you respect most when they speak. They don't rush. They don't scramble. They don't seem pressured by the moment. They take a second, sometimes two. And when they speak, their words feel intentional, not accidental. That effect is not natural talent. It is trained behavior. The pause gives your mind space to ask one critical question before you speak. What is the one thing that matters here? Without that question, most people default to dumping everything they know. They explain, they justify, they circle around the point instead of landing on it. A short pause prevents long explanations. This is why the pause becomes even more important under pressure. When you're challenged, interrupted, or put on the spot, your instinct is to defend yourself immediately. You feel the need to prove that you understand, that you're capable, that you belong in the conversation. But immediate defense rarely sounds confident. It sounds emotional. Pausing interrupts that instinct. It tells your nervous system that you are not under attack. It gives you distance from the emotional charge of the moment, and it signals to others that you are not rattled. Even a 2-second pause can change the entire dynamic of an interaction. Those 2 seconds separate reaction from response. They allow you to decide how you want to show up, instead of letting the moment decide for you. And while you pause, the other person waits. They adjust. They sense that you are not rushing to please or protect yourself. This is where authority begins. Silence feels uncomfortable at first because it removes a familiar habit. Many people use words as armor. Talking quickly keeps them from feeling judged. It keeps them from feeling exposed. Silence removes that shield, but discomfort is not danger. It's training. At first, when you pause, your mind may feel empty. That's normal. You've trained yourself for years to speak immediately. Your brain is used to noise, not space. The pause feels awkward because it's unfamiliar. Stay with it. Over time, those seconds stop feeling empty. They start feeling useful. You notice that your thoughts organize themselves without effort. You become aware of what not to say, and you begin to trust that clarity will appear if you give it room. A practical way to train this is the 2-second rule. Whenever someone finishes speaking, silently count to 2 before responding. You don't need to exaggerate it. You don't need to signal it. Just breathe and wait. Most people won't even notice the pause, but they will feel its effect. Your voice becomes steadier, your sentences become shorter, your tone sounds calmer, and people listen differently. The pause also protects you from saying things you don't mean. Many misunderstandings are not caused by wrong ideas, but by rushed delivery. Words spoken too quickly often come out harsher, weaker, or more defensive than intended. A pause gives you a filter. It allows you to remove unnecessary emotion before committing to words you can't take back. It reduces regret. It reduces reactivity. It increases accuracy. Another overlooked benefit of the pause is that it shifts responsibility. When you stop rushing to fill space, the burden of the moment no longer sits entirely on you. Silence subtly invites the other person to wait, to listen, to engage more thoughtfully. You are no longer performing. You are leading. This is why experienced negotiators, leaders, and speakers use silence intentionally, not to intimidate, but to stabilize the interaction. Silence slows the tempo of the exchange, and the person who controls tempo often controls outcome. Of course, the pause alone is not enough. It is the doorway, not the destination. But without it, none of the other skills in this audiobook work properly. Structure needs space. Clarity needs time. Calm needs breath. The pause creates all three. From now on, stop measuring your communication by how fast you respond. Measure it by how clearly your words land. Ask yourself after conversations not, did I answer quickly? But did my point arrive cleanly? Speed impresses briefly. Clarity lasts. As you practice pausing, you may notice resistance from yourself and from others. Some people are uncomfortable when you don't rush. They may try to interrupt the silence. Let them. Silence will still be working. You're not responsible for filling every gap. You're responsible for choosing your response. And once you stop fearing silence, something changes internally. You stop feeling chased by conversations. You stop feeling like you need to prove yourself in real time. You realize that control does not come from speed, it comes from choice. That realization is freeing. The pause teaches you that you are allowed to think, that you are allowed to choose your words, that you don't owe anyone an immediate reaction. You owe them clarity. If you remember nothing else from this chapter, remember this. You don't need to speak first. You need to speak intentionally. Silence is not something to escape. It is something to use. And once you learn to use it, communication stops feeling like a race and starts feeling like direction. Chapter 2. Organize your thoughts in seconds. Most people don't struggle with communication because they lack intelligence or ideas. They struggle because when it's time to speak, too many ideas arrive at once. Thoughts overlap. Emotions interfere. Words start moving before the mind has decided what actually matters. So instead of sounding clear, they sound scattered. This is not a thinking problem, it's an organization problem. Inside your head, chaos is normal. The human mind is not linear. It jumps, connects, remembers, anticipates, and reacts all at the same time. That's fine, until those thoughts leave your mouth without structure. Clear communication begins when you stop speaking the way you think and start thinking for the purpose of speaking. There's an important distinction here. Thinking is private. Speaking is public. Your listener does not hear your process. They hear your result. And if the result has no shape, they have nothing to hold on to. This is why people often say, I know what I mean, I just can't explain it. They do know, they just haven't selected. Clarity is not created by adding information, it is created by choosing. The first discipline of organized thinking is accepting a limit. The listener can only process a small amount of information at once. They are not following your internal reasoning. They are looking for direction. They want to know what matters now. Without that direction, attention drifts, even if the content is valuable. Strong communicators understand this instinctively. They don't try to deliver everything. They decide what the conversation needs in that moment and give only that. This is where the rule of one becomes essential. Before you speak, identify one idea you want the listener to remember. One conclusion. One point that anchors everything else. Not 3, not 5, 1. This rule feels restrictive at first. It can feel like you're leaving things out. But that restriction is exactly what creates clarity. When your mind knows it's looking for one thing, it stops racing. Without a filter, your brain tries to say everything. With a filter, it starts to compress. Compression is a skill. When you compress your thoughts, you're not oversimplifying. You're prioritizing. You're deciding what deserves airtime and what can stay internal. This decision often happens in seconds, but only if you train it. Another critical shift is reversing the order of how most people speak. Most people start with context. They explain the background. They walk through how they arrived at the idea. By the time they reach the point, the listener is already tired. Clear communicators do the opposite. They start with the point. They tell you the destination first. Then, if necessary, they explain the path. This gives the listener orientation. Once orientation exists, details make sense. Without it, details feel random. Orientation reduces mental effort. Reduced effort increases trust. A simple structure can support this habit. Point, reason, stop. State the idea clearly. Give one supporting reason if needed. Then stop talking. This structure protects you from rambling. It also trains your mind to think in outcomes instead of processes. You stop narrating your thoughts and start delivering conclusions. This doesn't make you rigid. It makes you readable. Another reason people struggle to organize their thoughts is emotional interference. Anxiety, excitement, or defensiveness hijacks attention. When emotion rises, structure collapses. This is why pausing matters. A brief pause gives emotion time to settle just enough for selection to happen. Organization requires space, not a long silence, just a deliberate moment. During that pause, ask yourself one quiet question. What is the core of this? That question alone organizes more than most techniques. Once the core is identified, speaking becomes easier. Your sentences shorten naturally. Your voice steadies. Your pace slows, not because you're trying, but because your mind knows where it's going. This is what people perceive as clear thinking. Clear thinking is not slower, it's lighter. Another important aspect of organization is resisting the urge to answer the question you fear instead of the one that was asked. Under pressure, people anticipate criticism and respond defensively. They add explanations no one requested. This habit creates confusion. Organized thinking requires trust. Trust that you can answer what's being asked without preemptive defense. If clarification is needed, it will be requested. Answer the question in front of you, not the imaginary one behind it. To train this skill, start practicing summarization. After conversations, ask yourself how you could have said the same thing in one sentence. Not a better sentence, a shorter one. At first, this feels uncomfortable. It feels exposed. But that discomfort is information. It shows you where you rely on excess words for safety. Over time, your brain adapts. It starts summarizing automatically. It stops flooding you with options. It learns that clarity is the goal, not completeness. You'll also notice something subtle but important. When your thoughts are organized, you feel calmer, not because the situation changed, but because your internal load decreased. Chaos creates stress. Structure creates relief. This relief is audible. People hear it in your voice. They feel it in your pacing. They respond differently, not because you sounded smarter, but because you sounded settled. Organizing your thoughts in seconds is not about control for control's sake. It's about respect. Respect for attention, respect for time, respect for understanding. When you respect those things, people trust you with more space, more responsibility, and more influence. Communication stops feeling like improvisation. It starts feeling like direction, and direction is what people follow. Chapter 3. Use silence to gain control in conversations. Most people treat silence as a mistake, something to avoid, something to cover up quickly before it becomes awkward. So they rush to fill it with words, explanations, nervous laughter, or unnecessary detail. But silence is not a gap. Silence is a tool. In any conversation, someone controls the pace, and the person who controls the pace often controls the outcome. Silence is how that control is established. When you speak continuously, you give away leverage. You signal urgency. You signal that you need the other person's approval or response. When you allow silence to exist comfortably, you reverse that dynamic. Silence slows everything down, and when things slow down, clarity rises. Think about what happens after you make a clear statement and then stop talking. The other person processes. They adjust. They often reveal more than they intended. Silence creates space for reaction, and reaction gives you information. People who fear silence miss that information because they rush past it. Silence also communicates confidence without saying a word. It tells the listener that you're not desperate to be heard, that you trust your point enough to let it stand on its own. This is why short answers followed by silence often feel stronger than long explanations. The message underneath the silence is simple. I've said what matters. This is especially powerful when you're interrupted or challenged. Most people react immediately. They talk over the interruption. They defend themselves. They escalate the exchange. Silence changes that pattern. When someone cuts you off, a brief pause followed by calm continuation often regains control more effectively than confrontation. You acknowledge the interruption without rewarding it with emotional energy. You don't fight for control. You hold it. Silence is also one of the most effective ways to reduce tension. When emotions rise, words tend to inflame rather than resolve. A pause lowers the temperature. It gives everyone a moment to reset. In that space, better choices become available. This doesn't mean you stay silent indefinitely. It means you choose when to speak, rather than reacting on impulse. Another important function of silence is filtering. When you stop talking sooner, you force yourself to prioritize. You say what matters most because you're no longer padding your message. The unnecessary falls away. Silence sharpens your words. Many people worry that if they stop talking, they'll lose the listener. In reality, the opposite is true. Silence creates anticipation. It makes people lean in. It signals that something intentional is happening. Of course, using silence effectively takes practice. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. You'll feel exposed. You'll feel like you're supposed to say something more. Resist that urge. Start by ending your sentences cleanly. Don't trail off. Don't add filler. Finish your thought. Then stop. Let the silence do its work. You'll notice something important. Most conversations don't fall apart in silence. They reorganize. People respond more thoughtfully. They ask clearer questions. They reveal their true concerns, and you gain time to observe instead of react. Silence also protects you from saying too much. Many people undermine their own point by continuing to talk after they've already made it. They weaken their position by adding qualifiers, excuses, or unnecessary justifications. When you stop at the right moment, your words retain their weight. This is why experienced leaders and negotiators are comfortable with silence. They understand that communication is not just about what is said, but about what is allowed to settle. Silence is not passive, it is an active restraint. When you combine silence with clarity, your presence changes. You no longer feel like you're chasing the conversation, you're guiding it. From this point on, start paying attention to how often you speak out of discomfort rather than intention. Notice how often silence could have done the work for you. Use it deliberately, because the moment you stop fearing silence, you stop losing control of your communication. In the next chapter, You'll learn how to respond to questions clearly and confidently, without rambling, over-explaining, or losing your point. Chapter 4. Answer questions without rambling. Most people don't struggle with answering questions because they lack knowledge. They struggle because the moment a question is asked, pressure appears, and pressure changes behavior. A simple question suddenly feels like an evaluation. A spotlight turns on. Time feels compressed. So instead of answering clearly, people start defending themselves before they've even said the point. This is how rambling begins. Rambling is not about having too much to say. It's about not knowing what to protect. When people are unsure how their answer will be received, they add layers. They explain their thinking. They justify their position. They try to cover every possible misunderstanding in advance. The result is a long answer that feels uncertain, even if the idea itself is solid. Strong communicators understand a different rule. The listener wants orientation before explanation. They want to know where you stand before they care about how you got there. When you delay the point, you force the listener to work too hard, and when attention drops, credibility follows. This is why the most effective answers start with the conclusion, not the context, not the backstory, the answer. When you lead with the answer, something important happens. The pressure drops. The listener relaxes. They know what they're listening for. Everything that follows becomes supportive instead of confusing. Most people do the opposite. They talk their way toward clarity. Strong communicators arrive at clarity first. Another reason people ramble is the fear of silence. After answering, they feel an urge to keep talking, to make sure they're understood, liked, or approved of. But clarity doesn't need protection. When you answer a question clearly and then stop, you signal confidence. You signal that your answer can stand on its own. Silence after an answer is not awkward. It's authoritative. Often, the best thing you can do after answering is to wait. If more detail is needed, it will be asked for. If it's not, you've already done your job. This is how control is maintained. A useful discipline here is limiting yourself deliberately. Decide that your answer will be 1 or 2 sentences. This forces selection. It forces you to decide what actually matters. If you can't answer within that space, your thinking may not be clear yet. That's not failure, it's information. Pause, clarify, then speak. Another common cause of rambling is answering the wrong question. People often respond to the question they fear, not the one that was asked. They anticipate criticism, disagreement, or judgment and respond defensively. Clear communication requires trust. Trust that the question is what it appears to be. Trust that you don't need to defend yourself unless challenged directly. Answer what was asked. Nothing more. This takes restraint, but restraint builds authority. When you stop over-explaining, people stop interrupting. They stop trying to redirect you. They start engaging with what you actually said. Rambling also weakens your message by creating internal contradictions. The longer you talk, the more likely you are to dilute or undermine your original point. Strong ideas lose strength when buried under excess explanation. Short answers protect clarity. This doesn't mean being cold or dismissive. It means respecting attention. Attention is limited. When you waste it, people notice, even if they don't say anything. To train this skill, practice answering everyday questions concisely. Notice how often you keep talking after the answer is complete. Practice stopping. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. You may feel exposed. That discomfort is the habit breaking. Over time, something shifts. Your answers become cleaner. Your tone steadies. Conversations feel more controlled. Because clarity invites respect. Answering without rambling is not about saying less for the sake of it. It's about saying what matters and trusting that it's enough. Chapter 5. Speak clearly. Under pressure. Pressure doesn't make communication harder. It reveals how prepared you are to stay calm. When pressure rises, most people speed up. Their breathing becomes shallow. Their voice tightens. Their thoughts race. Words come out faster than they can be organized. This reaction feels natural, but it's destructive. Speed under pressure signals panic, not intelligence. Clear communication in high-pressure moments begins with understanding one thing. Your nervous system leads your voice. If your body is tense, your words will be tense. If your breathing is rushed, your thoughts will scatter. You cannot outthink a stressed body. You must calm it first. This is why the most effective communicators slow down when pressure rises. They don't rush to prove competence. They stabilize themselves first and let clarity follow. One of the simplest ways to do this is breathing. A single deep breath before responding resets your nervous system. It tells your body that there is no immediate threat. That breath buys you clarity. Another critical adjustment is pace. Under pressure, people speak faster than they realize. What feels normal to you often sounds rushed to others. Slowing your pace, even slightly, changes everything. Slower speech communicates certainty. It gives your words weight. It also gives you time to choose what you're saying instead of reacting automatically. Tone matters just as much. When people feel pressure, their pitch often rises at the end of sentences, turning statements into questions. This subtle change signals uncertainty, even when the content is strong. Lowering your pitch at the end of sentences makes statements sound complete, grounded, decided. This alone can dramatically change how you're perceived. Another mistake under pressure is trying to win the moment. People argue harder, they interrupt more, they push their point aggressively. But pressure is not resolved through force. It's resolved through steadiness. Calm communication de-escalates tension. When you stay composed, the emotional center of the interaction shifts. The other person adjusts to you. Calm becomes contagious. Clear communication under pressure also requires focus. Pressure tempts people to address everything at once. They respond to tone, implication, emotion, and content simultaneously. This overload leads to confusion. Instead, choose one thing to respond to. One idea, one point, one sentence. Say it. Pause, then continue if needed. Pauses under pressure are powerful. They give your words time to land, they give the other person space to process, and they give you time to stay centered. Silence here is not weakness, it's control. Another important skill is emotional separation. Pressure often comes with emotional charge, anger, frustration, urgency. If you absorb that emotion, your communication suffers. You don't need to match emotional intensity to be effective. You need to remain clear. Respond to the content, not the emotion. This doesn't mean ignoring feelings. It means not letting them dictate your delivery. To train this, practice slowing down in low-pressure moments. Slow your speech when you're excited. Lower your voice when you're passionate. Control your pace when it doesn't matter. That's how calm becomes automatic. Over time, pressure stops feeling like a threat. It becomes a signal to slow down, not speed up. Clear communication under pressure is not about perfect words. It's about staying present long enough for the right words to appear. And when they do, people notice. Not because you spoke loudly, but because you stayed grounded when others didn't. Chapter 6. Choose words that carry weight. The words you choose do more than deliver information. They shape how people judge your confidence, your clarity, and your authority before they even finish listening to you. Long before logic is evaluated, language sets the emotional tone. Most people underestimate this. They believe meaning lives in ideas alone. But in reality, meaning is carried by how ideas are expressed. The same thought can sound confident or uncertain, decisive or hesitant, simply because of word choice. This is why two people can say the same thing and receive completely different reactions. Weak language doesn't usually come from weak thinking. It comes from protective habits. People soften their words to avoid being wrong. They hedge statements to avoid responsibility. They dilute ideas to avoid confrontation. Over time, these habits become automatic, and automatic language quietly erodes authority. Phrases like, "I think," "maybe," "kind of," "I'm not sure, but," slip into speech without intention. Individually, they seem harmless. Collectively, they send a clear signal. This message is negotiable. Strong communicators don't remove uncertainty by pretending to know everything. They remove it by owning what they do know. When you believe something, say it directly. When you don't know, say that clearly too. Direct uncertainty is stronger than vague confidence. Compare the difference. "I think this might work." "I don't know yet." "We need more data." The second statement sounds calmer, clearer, and more trustworthy. It doesn't hide behind softness. It states reality. This is what weight sounds like. Words that carry weight are not aggressive. They are aligned. There is no gap between thought and expression. The speaker is not apologizing for having an opinion, nor overcompensating for doubt. Another critical shift is moving from passive to active language. Passive phrasing distances you from your own message. Active phrasing signals ownership. Passive language says, "This happened." Active language says, "I decided." Ownership builds trust. People instinctively respect speakers who stand behind their words. Even when they disagree, they sense clarity, and clarity feels safe. Precision also matters. Vague words weaken impact because they force the listener to guess. Guessing creates mental effort. Mental effort reduces engagement. Simple, precise words do the opposite. They reduce friction. This doesn't mean using basic language because you lack depth. It means choosing language that travels cleanly. The most intelligent speakers are often the simplest, not because they know less, but because they understand more. They've already done the mental work. Another habit that weakens language is emotional inflation. Overusing strong adjectives, dramatic phrases, or exaggerated claims makes everything sound urgent. When everything is urgent, nothing is important. Weight comes from restraint. When emphasis is rare, it matters. When intensity is constant, it fades. Strong communicators choose moments carefully. They allow calm to be the default so that emphasis stands out when it appears. Sentence endings matter too. Words lose weight when sentences trail off. Clean endings feel complete. They signal that the thought has landed. You don't need to be forceful. You need to be finished. To train this skill, begin listening to yourself. Notice where you soften unnecessarily. Notice where you hedge out of habit. Remove one weak phrase at a time. Don't replace it with aggression. Replace it with clarity or silence. Silence often carries more weight than filler. As your language sharpens, something interesting happens. Your posture changes. Your voice steadies. You feel more grounded. Not because you're trying harder, but because your words finally match your intent. That alignment is what people feel when they say, they sound confident. It's not volume, it's not dominance, it's congruence. And once your words carry weight, you don't need to push them forward. They stand on their own. Chapter 7. Handle interruptions and pushback calmly. Interruptions and pushback are not accidents in communication. They are tests. Tests of composure, tests of presence, tests of whether your authority comes from internal stability or from uninterrupted comfort. Most people don't fail these tests because they lack skill. They fail because the moment control is challenged, emotion takes over before intention can respond. Someone interrupts you. Someone disagrees sharply. Someone questions your idea in front of others. Your body reacts first. A spike of irritation, a rush of defensiveness, an urge to reclaim space immediately. And in that instant, many people give control away. They talk louder, they speed up, they explain too much, or they shut down entirely. Both reactions come from the same place, the belief that interruption or pushback threatens your position. Calm communicators understand something different. Interruption is not a threat. Pushback is not an attack. They are signals, and signals can be handled deliberately. The first principle of handling interruption is not reacting immediately. When someone cuts you off, your nervous system fires before your thinking mind does. If you speak from that surge, your tone will betray tension, even if your words are polite. A brief pause interrupts the impulse. Silence here is not weakness. It is a reset. It gives your nervous system time to settle, so your response comes from clarity, not emotion. That pause does something else too. It signals that you noticed the interruption and that you're not rattled by it. Then comes acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is not agreement, it is presence. A simple phrase, delivered calmly, is enough. Let me finish this thought. I hear you, one moment. I'll address that in a second. No apology, no justification, no escalation. Tone matters more than words. Calm tone communicates control. Tense tone invites resistance. After acknowledgement, you continue exactly where you left off. You don't restart from the beginning. You don't over-explain. You don't rush. You resume. This continuity sends a powerful signal. You are not derailed. The interruption did not displace you. You did not lose your ground. You don't fight for space. You occupy it. Most people think authority comes from dominance. In reality, it comes from consistency. When your rhythm doesn't collapse under pressure, people adjust to you. Over time, interruptions decrease, not because you demanded respect, but because your presence made interruption ineffective. Pushback works the same way. When someone challenges your idea, the instinct is to defend immediately, to counter, to argue, to prove. But argument often creates more resistance, not less. Calm communicators separate challenge from identity. A challenge to your idea is not a challenge to your worth. It is information, and information can be handled without emotion. Before responding, listen fully. Not to prepare your rebuttal, but to understand what is actually being questioned. Often, pushback is not about disagreement. It's about uncertainty, risk, or misunderstanding. If you respond before understanding, you miss the real issue. Once you understand the substance, respond to that, not to the tone. Tone is emotional noise. Content is what matters. One of the strongest responses to pushback is restating your position clearly and briefly. No added defensiveness. No new arguments. Just clarity. State the point. Pause. Let it land. This feels risky to people who rely on explanation for safety. But clarity is safer than justification. Over-justifying signals uncertainty, even when the logic is sound. You don't need to convince immediately. You need to be understood. Calm repetition is powerful. When you restate your position without escalation, the conversation stabilizes. The other person senses that you are not shaken. That steadiness often softens resistance on its own. Calm disarms more effectively than force. Another important skill is resisting the urge to match intensity. When someone pushes harder, many people push back harder. This creates escalation. Calm communicators do the opposite. They lower intensity. Lowering intensity does not mean lowering conviction. It means lowering emotional noise so conviction can be heard. When you don't mirror aggression, you control the emotional temperature of the conversation. And the person who controls emotional temperature often controls direction. Handling interruption and pushback well also protects your energy. Reactive communication is exhausting. Every interruption feels like a fight. Every challenge feels personal. Calm control preserves focus. You stop bracing for attack. You stop replaying conversations afterward. You trust that you can handle disruption without losing yourself. This trust changes how communication feels internally. To train this skill, start with awareness. Notice your physical reaction when interrupted. The tightening, the urge to jump in, the emotional surge. Don't judge it, observe it, then practice pausing, just long enough to breathe. That breath is the difference between reaction and response. Practice acknowledgement without apology. Many people apologize automatically when interrupted. This reinforces the interruption. Replace apology with presence. Practice resuming without rushing. Let continuity do the work. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. You may feel exposed. You may worry that others will perceive you as passive. That discomfort is part of recalibration. You are unlearning reflexive defense. Over time, something shifts. Interruptions lose their emotional charge. Pushback feels less threatening. Conversations feel steadier, even when disagreement exists. This steadiness is what people recognize as authority. Not loud authority, not an aggressive authority, but anchored authority. Anchored authority doesn't depend on perfect conditions. It doesn't require uninterrupted flow or constant agreement. It holds its ground calmly, regardless of external pressure. And that is rare. When you handle interruption and pushback calmly, people respond differently. They interrupt less. They challenge more thoughtfully. They listen longer. Not because you demanded it, but because your presence set the tone. Control in communication is not about dominating others. It's about not being dominated by the moment. When you can stay grounded while others lose composure, your words carry weight, even when they're few. That is calm strength. And once you develop it, interruption stops being something you fear. It becomes just another moment you know how to handle. Chapter 8. Sound confident without being loud. Many people misunderstand confidence. They believe it comes from volume, intensity, or dominance. They assume that to be taken seriously, they need to speak louder, faster, or more forcefully than others. So they raise their voice. They talk over people. They push their words forward with urgency. But what they're really doing is compensating. True confidence doesn't announce itself, it settles into the room. If you pay attention to people who naturally command respect, you'll notice something surprising. They are rarely the loudest. They don't rush to speak. They don't compete for attention. And yet, when they talk, people listen. That's because confidence is not about energy. It's about stability. Loudness is often mistaken for strength, but loudness is usually reactive. It comes from the fear of being ignored, misunderstood, or overlooked. Calm confidence, on the other hand, comes from internal certainty. When you're sure of your ground, you don't need to push. You let your words arrive on their own. One of the clearest signals of quiet confidence is pace. Confident speakers speak at a measured rhythm, not slow in an exaggerated way, and not fast out of nervousness. Their pace feels intentional. It gives the listener time to follow, to absorb, to trust. When you rush, you communicate urgency. When you steady your pace, you communicate control. This doesn't mean removing emotion from your voice. It means choosing where emotion belongs. Calm confidence allows intensity to appear only when it serves the message, not when it serves insecurity. Another overlooked factor is breath. When people try to sound confident, they often tense their body. Shoulders tighten. Breath becomes shallow. The voice strains. Ironically, this makes them sound less grounded. Confidence begins in the body. A relaxed posture allows deeper breathing. Deeper breathing supports a fuller, steadier voice. Without forcing volume, your voice carries naturally. People can hear you clearly without feeling pushed. You don't need to be louder, you need to be clearer. Word choice also plays a critical role. Confident speakers don't rely on exaggeration or dramatic language. They don't inflate their statements to sound important. They choose precise words and let meaning do the work. Precision feels confident because it feels intentional. Overuse of strong emotional language often weakens credibility. When everything is urgent, nothing is. Calm confidence chooses restraint. It uses emphasis sparingly, which makes it more effective when it appears. Silence is another quiet marker of confidence. People who lack confidence fear silence. They rush to fill it, worried that stopping will make them look unsure. Confident communicators are comfortable stopping. They trust their point enough to let it stand. A pause after a sentence is not a gap to be filled. It's a moment for the message to land. Silence allows weight to form. It gives your words space to be heard. Confidence is also communicated through how sentences end. Trailing off signals uncertainty. Ending cleanly signals completion. You don't need to sound aggressive. You need to sound finished. Completion builds trust. Another mistake people make is trying to convince instead of present. When you push too hard, people feel pressure. Pressure creates resistance. Calm confidence removes pressure and invites engagement. Confident communication says, "Here is the idea," not, "Please accept this idea." That subtle difference changes everything. You don't need to win people over emotionally. You need to give them something solid to respond to. Calm delivery makes that possible. This style of communication also protects you from overreacting. When you're not trying to prove yourself, interruptions bother you less. Challenges feel less threatening. You stay centered because your confidence is not dependent on immediate validation. It comes from alignment between what you think and what you say. To train this skill, start reducing effort. Speak with slightly less force than feels natural. Slow your pace just enough to feel uncomfortable at first. End your sentences clearly. Stop when the point is made, then observe. You'll notice people leaning in instead of pulling away. Conversations feel steadier. You feel less drained after speaking. That's because you're no longer performing. You're present. Confidence also grows with preparation. When you've thought something through, your delivery naturally softens. You don't need to protect the idea. You know where you stand. Over time, this becomes your default. You stop associating confidence with volume and start associating it with composure. And composure is contagious. People mirror calm. They respond to steadiness. They trust those who don't seem rushed to impress. Sounding confident without being loud is not about shrinking yourself. It's about removing unnecessary force so your real presence can come through. Quiet confidence doesn't demand attention. It earns it. And once you learn to communicate from that place, people don't just hear you, they respect you. Chapter 9. Make people understand you instantly. One of the most frustrating moments in communication is realizing that someone nodded, agreed, even smiled, and still completely misunderstood you. You spoke clearly, at least in your mind. You explained carefully, and yet the message didn't land. This is where most people get communication wrong. They assume understanding is guaranteed by effort. They believe that if they explain enough, people will eventually get it. But understanding doesn't come from effort. It comes from simplicity. People don't misunderstand you because they're not listening. They misunderstand you because your message didn't give their mind something solid to grab onto. Their attention slipped, not out of disrespect, but out of overload. Understanding happens fast or not at all. The human brain decides very quickly whether it's following you or not. If it can't identify the core of what you're saying within moments, it disengages. Not consciously, automatically. This is why long explanations often fail. They delay clarity instead of delivering it. Strong communicators think in reverse. They don't ask, "How much should I say?" They ask, "What will make this click immediately?" Instant understanding begins with compression. Compression is the skill of taking something complex and reducing it to its most usable form. Not the most accurate version, not the most detailed, the most usable. You can always add detail later. You can't recover attention once it's lost. Most people fear compression because they associate it with oversimplification. They worry that if they simplify, they'll lose nuance or sound less intelligent. The opposite is true. The ability to simplify complex ideas is a sign of deep understanding. If you truly understand something, you can explain it in a way that others can grasp quickly. If you can't, clarity is still missing. The first step to instant understanding is identifying the anchor sentence. Before you explain anything, decide on one sentence that captures the core of your message. This sentence is not a summary of everything, it's the spine. Everything else exists to support it. Without an anchor, your explanation floats. With one, every detail has a place. Ask yourself, if I could only say one sentence, what would it be? That sentence is where understanding begins. Once the anchor is set, the listener's mind relaxes. They know what they're listening for. Details stop feeling random. They become reinforcing instead of distracting. Orientation creates trust. Another key to instant understanding is using concrete language. Abstract ideas are heavy. They require mental translation. Concrete ideas land faster because they connect to experience. Instead of describing concepts, describe effects. Instead of theory, describe outcomes. You don't need long stories. Often, one short, specific example does more than 5 explanations. Examples turn ideas into something recognizable, but examples must be clean. One example is usually enough. Multiple examples blur the point and compete for attention. Understanding prefers precision. Another obstacle to instant understanding is unnecessary complexity in language. Jargon, technical terms, and elaborate phrasing slow comprehension, even when the listener understands them. Simple words move faster. Simple does not mean shallow. It means accessible. Strong communicators choose words that reduce mental effort. They don't force the listener to decode meaning. They deliver it. If someone has to work hard to understand you, they won't feel confident in what they heard, even if they technically understood it. Clarity is not about impressing. It's about being unmistakable. Order also matters. The brain wants orientation before information. It wants to know where you're going before it cares about how you got there. This is why starting with context often fails. Context only helps once the point is clear. Without the point, context feels like noise. Lead with the idea, then support it. This order reduces cognitive load. The listener no longer has to guess why you're saying what you're saying. They can follow without effort. Tone plays a role as well. When you sound uncertain, the listener becomes cautious. When you sound calm and grounded, they trust the message more easily. Trust accelerates understanding. You don't need to convince people to understand you. You need to make it easy. Another overlooked factor is pacing. Important ideas need space to land. When you rush through key points, you deny the listener processing time. Strategic pauses allow meaning to form. A brief pause after a key sentence often does more than additional explanation. Silence gives understanding room to settle. Instant understanding also requires letting go of ego. Many people over-explain because they want to be seen as thorough, smart, or competent. But thoroughness is not clarity. Understanding is not about covering every angle. It's about covering the right one. When you prioritize being understood over being impressive, your communication changes. You speak less. You choose better. You stop cluttering your message with unnecessary detail. To train this skill, practice reduction. After you explain something, ask yourself, what could I remove without losing the point? Then remove it. Over time, your communication sharpens naturally. You'll notice people asking fewer clarifying questions. Not because you said more, but because you said less. Conversations move faster. Decisions become easier. Misunderstandings decrease because understanding arrived early. When people understand you quickly, something powerful happens. They stop evaluating your delivery and start engaging with your ideas. They respond to substance instead of struggling with form. That's when communication becomes efficient, and efficiency builds credibility. Instant understanding is not about shortcuts. It's about respect. Respect for attention, for time, and for mental energy. When you make it easy for people to understand you, they feel that respect, and people trust those who respect them. Understanding is the gateway to influence. Without it, even the best ideas go nowhere. Make your message easy to grasp, and everything else becomes possible. Chapter 10. Train communication like a skill. Most people treat communication like a personality trait, something you're either born with or not. They say things like, "I'm just not good at speaking," or "that person is naturally articulate." And because of that belief, they approach communication passively. They hope it improves with time. They wait for confidence to appear. They rely on mood, circumstance, or motivation. But communication is not a trait. It is a trainable skill. And like any skill, it improves only when it is practiced deliberately. The reason most people plateau in their communication is not lack of intelligence or effort. It's lack of feedback and repetition. They speak every day, but they don't train. They repeat the same habits, the same mistakes, the same patterns, and wonder why nothing changes. Training begins when intention replaces autopilot. Think about how other skills are built. No one expects to get stronger without resistance. No one expects to play an instrument well without repetition. Communication is no different. The difference is that most people never isolate it as something to work on. They just use it. Strong communicators do something different. They step outside the moment and observe themselves. They treat conversations as data, not judgments. Every interaction becomes information they can learn from. This mindset shift is the foundation of mastery. The first step in training communication is awareness. You cannot change what you don't notice. Start paying attention to how you speak when there's no pressure to perform. Notice your pace, your tone, your habits. Do you rush? Do you soften your words? Do you over-explain? Do you avoid silence? Don't judge, just observe. Awareness turns unconscious habits into conscious choices. The second step is deliberate repetition. Improvement doesn't come from trying to fix everything at once. It comes from focusing on one small adjustment and repeating it until it becomes natural. 1 week, focus only on pausing before you speak. Another week, focus on answering in one clear sentence. Another week, focus on slowing your pace under pressure. Small changes, practiced consistently, compound quickly. One of the most effective training tools is recording yourself. This makes many people uncomfortable, which is exactly why it works. When you listen to your own voice objectively, you hear patterns you never noticed before. You hear where you rush, where you trail off, where you lose clarity. This is not about criticism, it's about calibration. Athletes watch replays. Musicians listen to recordings. Communicators should do the same. Another powerful training method is intentional constraint. Give yourself limits. Decide that you'll answer questions in one sentence, or that you'll stop speaking after making your point. Constraints force clarity. They prevent you from falling back on old habits. Training also means practicing in low-stakes environments. Don't wait for high-pressure moments to try new skills. Use everyday conversations. Use casual discussions. Use situations where the outcome doesn't matter. That's where muscle memory is built. Then, when pressure arrives, your body already knows what to do. Consistency matters more than intensity. 10 minutes of focused practice every day is more effective than 1 hour once a week. Communication improves through frequency, not force. This is why people who speak regularly often improve faster if they reflect. Without reflection, repetition just reinforces old habits. Another critical part of training is separating identity from performance. A poor conversation does not mean you're a poor communicator. It means you had a moment that revealed a skill gap. That gap is information, not a verdict. When you stop taking communication personally, you become free to improve it. Strong communicators are not perfect. They are adaptable. They adjust based on feedback. They refine based on experience. They don't cling to ego. They cling to clarity. Over time, this approach changes how communication feels. It stops being stressful. You stop overthinking every interaction. You trust your process. Confidence becomes a byproduct, not a goal. Training also builds resilience. When you know you're working on your skill, setbacks don't discourage you. Awkward moments don't define you. They become part of the process, and the process works. Eventually, clarity becomes automatic. Pausing feels natural. Structure appears without effort. Calm shows up even when stakes are high. You don't need to remember techniques, they're embedded. That's when communication stops feeling like work. It becomes expression. The final truth of strong communication is this: mastery is not about speaking perfectly. It's about speaking intentionally, consistently, and with awareness. It's about choosing growth over comfort. Every conversation is an opportunity to train. Every pause is a chance to choose. Every word is a reflection of clarity. You don't need talent to communicate well. You need practice with purpose. And when you commit to that, communication stops being something you worry about and becomes something you trust. Communication is often treated as something external, a performance, a skill you turn on when you need to impress, persuade, or defend yourself. But the truth you've seen throughout this audiobook is simpler and deeper. Communication is not about talking. It's about thinking clearly under pressure. Every technique you've learned points back to this single idea: pausing before you speak, organizing your thoughts, using silence, choosing words carefully, staying calm when challenged, sounding confident without being loud, making yourself understood instantly, training deliberately. None of these are tricks. They're expressions of clarity. When your thinking is clear, your communication follows naturally. When your thinking is scattered, no technique can fully save you. This is why communication improves not when you try harder, but when you become calmer. Most people spend their lives reacting to questions, reacting to tone, reacting to pressure, reacting to fear of being judged, misunderstood, or dismissed. Their words are shaped by urgency instead of intention. And urgency creates noise. What you've learned is how to step out of that pattern. You've learned that speed is not the same as intelligence, that silence is not weakness, that clarity does not require explanation, that confidence is felt more than it is heard, and that control is quiet. These shifts may feel subtle, but their effect is profound. When you pause before speaking, you reclaim ownership of the moment. When you organize your thoughts, you stop chasing your word. When you use silence, you stop competing for attention. When you answer clearly, you earn trust. When you stay calm under pressure, you change the emotional direction of conversations. This is what people respond to. They may not consciously analyze why you sound different, but they feel it. They feel steadiness. They feel intention. They feel that your words are not accidental, and that feeling changes how they treat you. Respect is not demanded. It is sensed. One of the most important ideas to carry forward is this: communication is not about being right, it's about being understandable, being heard, being clear enough that others can respond meaningfully. When you focus on clarity instead of control, influence follows naturally. Another truth worth remembering is that discomfort is part of growth. Pausing may feel awkward at first. Ending sentences cleanly may feel exposed. Using silence may feel risky. But discomfort is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that habits are changing. Every skill you've developed here becomes stronger through repetition. That's why training matters. You don't improve communication by waiting for confidence. You improve it by practicing clarity in ordinary moments. Low-stakes conversations, casual interactions, daily exchanges where nothing is on the line. Those moments build the muscle memory that shows up when pressure arrives. Over time, something powerful happens. You stop overthinking what to say. You stop replaying conversations afterward. You stop feeling rushed to prove yourself. Because you trust your process. You know how to pause. You know how to choose the point. You know how to stay calm. That trust changes how communication feels inside your body. It becomes less draining, less tense, less performative. Speaking becomes something you do, not something you brace for. And that inner shift is visible to others. People listen differently when you're not trying to impress them. They engage more honestly. They challenge you more thoughtfully. They interrupt less. They respect your pace, not because you asked for it, but because you modeled it. As you move forward, remember that mastery is not perfection. You will still have awkward moments. You will still say things you wish you'd phrased differently. That's not failure, that's practice. What matters is awareness. Awareness allows adjustment. Adjustment creates progress. If you take one thing from this audiobook, let it be this. You don't need to talk more to be heard. You need to think clearly enough to speak with intention. When clarity leads, words follow. Think clearly. Speak deliberately. Pause when it matters, and let your communication reflect the calm strength that's already there. That is how smart communication is built.